Welcome to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast, empowering you to take a whole person approach to your well-being, spirit, soul, and body. Join me, your host, Dr. Lara, naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, and a servant of Jesus Christ. We are not just a body, we are spirit and soul. It's time to integrate medicine and spirituality into our healing. Let's get started. Welcome back to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. This episode I want to dedicate to talking about hormone health in teenagers and in young women. By young women, I'm talking about women in their 20s, so 20 to 30s. It's very sad for me to see young women coming into my office, these teenage girls, and they are telling me how they feel, and they are showing signs and symptoms of low hormones. So I'll start off by saying that it's not common in medicine for a teenager who's 15 or 16 years old or a 20-year-old woman to have their doctors do hormone testing on them. First of all, insurance won't even consider that. Sometimes even women in their 30s, they're like, you're too young. It's not an issue. It's not that. And I don't believe in turning away from looking at hormones. So I always offer the option to my patients, especially the parents when they're bringing in their young teenage daughters or sons. But usually what I'll give them an option is a cash pay option to check the full panel of sex female hormones in their teenager or young 20-year-old so that it's affordable and they know what their out-of-pocket's going to be up front instead of getting a $3,000 bill for labs that their insurance is not willing to cover because, according to standard of medicine, they are too young to be assessed for hormone imbalances. And let me tell you, when I get these values back, it is scary to see the number every single time. There's not been one time that my medical brain says we need to check hormones in this 15-year-old and the parents say, okay, let's do it. Every single time when I get their hormones results back, they're low. Their progesterone is low. Their estrogen is low. Testosterone is low sometimes. DHEA is low. And so that's a huge concern. Huge. Because this is the most optimal time in their life. And it's not normal for 20-year-olds to have low hormones like this. So oftentimes, in a jokingly way, to encourage these young teens and girls, women, is that I tell them, I'm 46 years old and my hormones are optimal. Not just for my age, they're optimal. My hormones are better than your hormones and you're 15 or you're 20 years old. Do you see the concern there? That's not normal. And so what I see is this very common trend. And the last episode, we talked about the common mistakes that women make, right? And men do it as well. But the common mistakes that people are making, these teenagers are just starting very early on to make those same mistakes and have those patterns. So women, you need to take care of yourselves because your daughters are watching you and they're following your example. Not because you told them to follow your example. You know how it goes with children. You tell them to do something and they don't do it. But the things that they do are the things that you don't tell them to do. It's the things that you model for them. So if they see mom burning the candle on both ends, not sleeping, not eating, not exercising, or being extreme about their body image, they pick that behavior up too. And it's early on, we have to model these healthy behaviors for children as they enter that pre-puberty stage and that preteen stage and into their teenage years. This is the time for young girls to really start making healthy decisions that's going to impact the longevity of their life, the quality of their life. It's when they're young. Otherwise, they acquire these very poor behaviors that I don't know about you, but I didn't have these behaviors that these young girls are having. It seems to be a trend. And I know it has a lot to do with the access to technology. They have a phone glued to their hand and they're constantly on it, and they go to bed with it, and they have all this stimulus, and they're not going to bed early enough to make hormones. So this conversation is geared to these teenage girls and these young women. So I want you to share this episode with them because I need them to hear what I'm about to share. Some of these behaviors that a lot of these young girls have, their moms are doing it too. And so are the dads. This seems to be an issue in our country where people wake up, get ready, and they're out the door. They don't need anything. They get to school, these young girls that are still in school, in high school or college, they get to school, they're not having lunch there. They don't like the lunch. They're too cool to take lunch, so they starve themselves. And then they get home, 2, 3 o'clock. They'll snack on junk, chips, and whatever's there. And then whenever mom makes dinner, that's when they eat. How are you going to make hormones if you're having one real meal a day? And then you wonder why you're stuffing your face with carbs, with chips, with cookies, with junk food. Because at the cellular level, you're starving. Your body wants food, but you're not giving it. Now, if you're a student, whether you're in high school or college, you really need food because your brain is going to be processing more and it needs energy to process more. Therefore, if you're not getting the protein and the healthy fats, your brain is starving. It cannot learn, it cannot focus, it cannot function. It can't remember what you learned in class. So now cognitively, it's affecting you. Your energy's low. And then what happens is I get these young teenage girls in my office that have really bad acne, have low energy, feel depressed or have anxiety, can't sleep, right? And this should be the most optimal time in your life. You should have so much energy and have such a positive outlook in life. But I'll tell you what, this right here, these cell phones, it's what's the problem. When these young girls are on social media comparing themselves to other people's standards and what they're saying, there's too much noise in our world and we got to shut it off. We got to shut it off and we got to get back to living life. And so with these young girls, I see this very often. So their hormone, the symptoms they're telling me is they're missing periods. Now, I know through medical school, we were told when a young girl goes through starts their menstrual cycle, they could be irregular here and there. They might not get it every month. They might miss periods. It might be until their body regulates. But there is a point that your body will find its normal cycle. And what I'm referring to when I say missed periods, I'm talking about 5-6 months without a period. And that could be a teenager or a 20-year-old. That's not normal. So oftentimes the reason they're missing they're not having a period every month is because, like I said, they're not eating enough. They're starving themselves. And if you don't have the building blocks, you cannot make these hormones. They're super tired and their moods. Parents always will tell me about the mood swings. They're irritated about everything. And it's because their brain is still being developed. Whether you're 20, 22, 25, your prefrontal cortex is still developing and it needs these building blocks, especially the healthy fats. So mood swings, they can have acne, and like I said, then they start having anxiety, panic attacks, they can't sleep. It is the same common cycle that you see in women who are going through menopause. So a 20-year-old is not going through menopause, right? So their hormone levels are off, but they're not going through menopause yet. They're too young. So then we know it's because they're not eating enough food and they're not sleeping well and they have too much stress. They're stressing about the things like social media, technology, things that are not really big stressors, So it makes it more difficult for them to navigate that. So, once again, the estrogen and progesterone, let's talk about progesterone because I don't think progesterone gets enough light on how important it is. So progesterone, in the process of, someone trying to conceive and get pregnant and maintain a pregnancy, progesterone is really important to maintain a pregnancy, and it increases really high in a pregnant woman. And this is the reason why women, when they're pregnant, especially those first 3 months, they are so exhausted. They fall asleep everywhere. They just want to sleep. And so oftentimes women want to bring up their energy, but progesterone is doing its job. It's actually saying, go to sleep, slow down, rest, because you're building a baby. And so the effects of progesterone on the body, on the brain, on the nervous system has a calming effect. Now, when you're not pregnant, so in a young woman who's not wanting to get pregnant, you still need to have a healthy level of progesterone. And like I said, the luteal phase, which are days 19 to 21, it's the ideal time to look at the levels of progesterone, because this is the one time of the month that it will peak at its highest. And we need to see what that level is. When women have healthy levels of progesterone, they're going to feel cool, calm, and collective. There could be a lot of chaos and stressful situations in your life, but because this hormone is in your body, it's going to help regulate your nervous system. When it's not there, look it up. If you don't believe me, just look it up. Low progesterone can give you anxiety. It can cause panic attacks. How many young girls are experiencing anxiety and having panic attacks? Grown women are having anxiety and panic attacks. They go to their doctor and they say, I'm having anxiety and panic attacks. Or they go to the emergency room, I'm having anxiety and panic attacks. And what do? They give them, medications for anxiety. That's not the solution. So the only way to know is to do the test, is to get tested. And I know there's a lot of talk on social media, like you don't need to do a lab test to know if your hormones are off. Just follow the symptoms. Well, how do you know how far off your hormones are? Let me just give you an idea. The ideal range of progesterone in a female during the luteal phase is between 15 to 23 units of progesterone. Men have like 0.2, very little. They don't need a lot. But for women, that's a lot. And that's the optimal range. So 15 to 23 is optimal. When I'm checking the hormones of these young girls, they're coming at 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. If they're lucky, maybe they have 2 points. 2 points during the luteal phase, where they should be closer to 23 units of progesterone. Do you see how concerning that is? And if no one is checking these young girls for hormones, how do you know they're not having hormone imbalances? They are. And it's an alarming rate. I mean, I'm just one clinic. I can just imagine across the country how many other girls are experiencing low hormones. And it's because of their lifestyle choices. They're not eating enough. They're not sleeping enough. Chronic stress for petty things. That's where the modifications need to come into play. Don't wait till they're later on in life to address them. Address them now. Because they're young, they're more likely to adapt to change and understand how this is important for you to get a good handle on your lifestyle behaviors early on versus when you're 30 and 40 years old. And here's why I think in young people it's critical. So in women, when they go through menopause, the reason and I'm going to have an episode on menopause, so stay tuned for that. But the adrenal glands are supposed to kick in to make a little bit of hormone of progesterone and estrogen when women are going through menopause. Now, if women have lived all their life in chronic stress, they're tapping into those adrenal glands all the time, and they deplete their adrenal gland function. So when they're going through menopause, those adrenal glands cannot make those hormones anymore. They're on empty. So they're empty all the way through. And that's why they experience the hot flashes. They experience all these other symptoms. Well, if we don't teach young teenage girls and young women to regulate their stress response, to eat better, to sleep better, to get their bodies moving, right? Get rid of the hormone disruptors. They're going to be tapping into their adrenal gland function very early on. By the time they won't even make it to 50. By the time they're in the 30s and 40s, their adrenal glands are crashed, maybe sooner than that. So when they are going through menopause, the symptoms they will experience in menopause will be greater than any. And I know this is true. I've talked to my mother and women in her generation who are 70 and 80 and older. A lot of the women who lived moderate lives, they didn't have crazy stress. They ate well, they slept well. When they went through the transition of menopause, they don't have the hot flashes. My mom said, I didn't have any of those symptoms. I don't know what women were talking about. So, and my mother grew up in a time and place that poverty was real stressors were present. Are we going to have food? Is there going to be money to get our basic needs? Instead of worrying about comparing yourself how another female looks on social media and getting all the pressures of the world on you of what you should do, what you should look like, what you should be doing in life. Those are pressures and stressors that we can shut off by limiting our time on our phones. You're not worried about, are you going to have food on your table for the most part? So those are real stress responses, and the stress that we have now, it's like, it's just in our minds. It's not a real threat. And so that's what I'm seeing in young girls is this constant, chronic fatigue and burnout when they're just teenagers. Irregular periods, like I said, the mood swings, and just feeling depressed. So I really encourage to have this conversation with your teenager or your young adult female to really manage, their lifestyle. Get eating. Start at least with eating breakfast, and take something, a quick protein source with you for lunch. But we need to start breaking some of these behaviors. If you notice that your teenager is experiencing these symptoms, like, hormone, like the hormone imbalances, a lot of cystic acne, they're not sleeping well, they're low energy, they're moody, their menstrual periods are off, get them help. Find a doctor. You can reach my clinic and ask how I work with teenagers, but you really should get those hormones checked for them, because you will be surprised that these young people's hormones are running low. So I hope this information has brought some value to you, but I just want to shine some light on this topic of young people and low hormones, because these young women and men also are going to have a hard time when it comes to fertility. When they're married and they're wanting to conceive, you're going to see a lot of these young people having a hard time conceiving and maintaining a healthy pregnancy because their body is not making enough hormones. So I know when you're 15 and 18 and 20, you're not thinking about, conception, of getting pregnant, starting a family. But don't wait till you get to the point that you are wanting a family and then you're struggling to get pregnant because of the lifestyle choices. On the flip end, I see a lot of girls too who are over-exercising. Like I said in the last episode, they're over-exercising and they're not eating enough food. Those two things have to match. If you're going to put more demand on your body, it's going to need more fuel. It's energy. Your body needs the protein. It needs the healthy fats. It needs the energy to pull that weight to be able to endure that kind of physical activity. Otherwise, that over-exercising and under-eating is going to create a stress in your body. And those stress responses can create autoimmune conditions and cancers and other nutrient deficiencies and issues. So you want to make sure you're getting the right blood work done for these conditions. I hope you've enjoyed this information. Share it with someone who has children, young teenagers, young adults, or who is a teenager and a young adult to start taking their health serious. I'm not your mama, but maybe you should listen to your mama when she tells you to eat your breakfast and to go to bed early. It's for you. A lot of women are focused on anti-aging and they're injecting their faces with things and doing all these invasive therapies. But what you should really be doing is eating well, sleeping well, and exercising. That is your anti-aging. That's how you're going to preserve your youth. So I hope you found this message of great value. And until next time, be blessed. Thank you for listening to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please like, share, and subscribe. Help this message reach more people who may need to hear it. Leave your comments. I want to know what you think. If you're interested in learning more about Raices, visit our website at raicesndmedcenter.com. Until next time, be blessed.